My name's Matthew Jones, and I'm a senior lecturer in cinema and television history at Montfort University. My colleague at UCL, Professor Melvyn Stokes, was giving a lecture about cinema going in the 1960s, and this was to a group of people who previously attended UCL during that period. And apparently at the end of it, he was inundated by people wanting to share their memories with him. So he thought, well, isn't this a wonderful idea to collect memories of the period? And that can help us to find out both about what cinema going was like, but also can shed some light on the social and cultural history of the period as well. So Melvyn applied to the Arts and Humanities Research Council for some money, and then brought me onto the project once he'd secured the funding. And so we spent 3 years together, along with a colleague, Dr. Emma Pett, and we collected 1,000 people's memories. There are a few that have really tickled me, I suppose, over the years. One of a cinema in a remote town in northwest Scotland, where the roof of the cinema was corrugated iron, and so when it rained, as it very often did in this town, the raindrops on the roof, the sound of that would drown out the film completely. People ended up making up their own dialogue because they just couldn't hear what was going on. So you get couples kind of imagining together what was happening on the screen to try and fit with the images, which I always thought sounded quite charming, if very annoying too. There was another one of a cinema, I believe in Manchester, which had its own cinema cat, and there was a woman who was a big cat lover, and she would go to the cinema week by week and see this cat prowling around, occasionally cozying up to people, but never to her, until one glorious day the cat came and sat on her lap, and it was her favourite cinema experience. Nothing to do with the film, nothing to do with the environment, simply because the cat sat on her lap. I've always found that really, really charming. So often the best stories that we get aren't really those that are to do with the films at all, because the films you watch once and then they slip away in memory. But the experience of being in the cinema, of travelling to the cinema, of going through the cinema foyer, that's the sort of stuff that happened week in, week out. And so it seems to have stuck around much more strongly than the films themselves. And so it's those memories that are often the most charming. And there have been projects such as Annette Coon's project on cinema going in Britain in the 30s. Jackie Stacey's done some work around female audiences in the 40s and 50s. So it seemed sensible to work on the 1960s. Not only because of that, but also because the 60s is seen as a period of great social change in Britain. It's a period of swinging London, and of the pill, and of the legalisation of abortion and homosexuality. So it's a period where British society is often thought to change a great deal. People are now rethinking that and saying, well, actually, how widespread were the changes? What were their effects to people across the social spectrum and across the country? And people are starting to kind of revise their thinking on that a bit. So we wanted to look at cinema going's place within all of that. So cinema going was rapidly changing, and I don't think people really appreciate that cinema going was ever anything other than it currently is. I think people my age certainly don't often appreciate that cinema going was often quite a different activity, that it felt quite different. And so what we want to do is try and bring that sense of the specificity of cinema going in the 1960s, what made it different from cinema going in the 50s and the 70s, and to help people understand that. So for people my age, it's an opportunity to learn about our past, and the past of an activity that remains really very relevant and very popular today. Recreating a night at the cinema in the 1960s as an immersive theatrical event. I've very generously been offered use of the Phoenix Cinema in Leicester and of the Picture House Central Cinema at Piccadilly Circus in London. And in those two spaces in March and then again in June, I'm going to be working with about 20 actors to embody the memories that we've collected, I suppose. So we're having a 50th anniversary screening of Hammer's most popular film of the decade, which was 1 Million Years BC, starring Raquel Welch. And we're going to screen that along with a newsreel, potentially a B-movie, adverts from the period and so forth. We're going to have the actors be usherettes be a commissionaire at the door. I may well play a cinema manager myself. We're going to have actors playing audience members in amongst the audience, living out the memories that we've collected. So the audience will get a chance to see not only how cinema going was different in the 1960s, but also they'll get a chance to meet some of the 1960s characters that are amalgamations of the memories that we've been collecting on the project.